Hello! Welcome to the Auxi Project's first ever course on coding. Now in this course, we're going to be exploring some of the fundamentals of Java, and it is a beginner-friendly course, so you don't have to worry too much if you've never coded before, or if you've never taken a computer science course before. That's completely fine. We're starting from the very basics, and so today will be more of a laid-back lesson where first we talk a bit about what exactly Java is. Then we'll start navigating our IDE, which in this case will be Repl.it. We'll also get started on some programming right away, where we print output to the console and take in input from the console. To start it off, let's think a bit about what exactly computer science is. Now when I think about computer science, I usually think about the movies, all the sci-fi movies that I've watched about it. And usually in those movies, we'll have the main character typing in to a computer, and then a bunch of words show up on the screen, then some lights flash, and something cool happens. Now whether or not this is the case in reality will be up to you guys, because in this course we will get to do some coding ourselves, and maybe as we start coding you can draw parallels to what you've seen in the movies and what you're doing in real life. So what exactly is code? Maybe you've heard me talk about it a bunch of times and maybe you have some ideas in your head already, but in my words, code is just an instruction for the computer in written language. Now, because the computer is more or less just a piece of metal, maybe some plastic and also some electricity running through it, but it is not a living being, so even though it can do all these cool things, it is at the end of the day just an instrument for us. Now, what the computer requires is very, very specific instructions from us, the programmer. And at first it might be weird, because sometimes if you miss a very specific instruction, the computer won't understand you and then the program won't work. That's when you get an error. So we will be running into quite a few errors in this course. That's completely okay. You learn from your errors and your mistakes. So Java is just one specific language in the world of computer science. And on the right, you can see a table with lots and lots of languages. These are all completely separate. They have different syntax, so different words. But at the end of the day, they do more or less the same thing with the computer. Some of you may already know a few other languages. Maybe you've started off learning Python or C++, and now you're interested in learning Java, which is great because it's always nice to learn a few more languages so you have a more versatile skill set. Now, Java is actually the second most popular programming language in the world. It's used by a lot of people and a lot of companies. So if you do aspire to have a career in programming, it's great to have a bit of a foundation in Java and to be able to more or less do a few programs in it. Alright, so that's enough of this theory. Let's get started with actual code. Now, like I said before, the IDE that we're using is Repl.it. Now an IDE, so an integrated development environment, is just a platform for us to start coding. And many IDEs require you to download their softwares on your computer. And while you can definitely do that, it might take too much time for our purposes, so we are just using a web browser IDE. So on our web browser, let's type in Repl.it and get on the website. So once you're on the website, it may require you to start an account first, so you can quickly do that. And once you do, it will bring you to the home page, which looks more or less like mine does right now. And in the top left corner, you can press the blue button to create a new project. Now once you do that, it'll open a window where you can choose which language you want to code in and also with what you want to title your Repl.it. As you can see from this drop-down menu, there are dozens and dozens of different languages, and some may be more similar to Java than others. But in this case, we will be coding in Java. So let's select Java for our template, and it does generate a random title for you. You can keep it if you want, but for us, let's call it Hello World. You may have noticed that I've titled it in a very specific way. I have no spaces in here, and each word is capitalized. And this is how you should be titling your projects in Java and in many other languages in general. It's a bit of a convention, a naming convention. It's called casing. And when we talk about variables later, we'll talk a bit more about naming conventions and how you're supposed to properly name your variables. Alright, so once you've done that, let's create our REPL. So this might be a lot to take in, but I'll be, once again, kind of helping you guys navigate this. On the right, this big black window on the right side is called our console. And this is what will be showing up after we run our code, which we'll do with this green button at the top. Now, where we'll be spending most of our time is this middle window that's titled main.java. This window is where we can type in stuff, make edits, and alright, so what we have here are 5 lines of code that's already been put into our program. Now because we started from a template, this is already automatically here, but if you didn't start from a template, it would be blank right now. So there are a lot of words right now, and you might understand the words but not what they mean, but that's okay because I will be going through every line, or as much as I can right now. But I promise later on this course, you will be able to have a more broader understanding of what these mean. So to start it off, let's try running our program right now with no edits and seeing what it does. Great. So as you can see, on the right, it has printed out Hello World, which is exactly what's written in line 3 over here in brown. All this stuff above it, you can ignore for now. For our intents and purposes, we don't have to worry too much about it. Usually it will display errors if we have any, and it's more for the programmer to know, what is going on with their code. So, as you can imagine, what it's printed out here came from what we put in here. So to test this theory, if we change these words to something else, like maybe I'm coding in Java, you can take a wild guess at what's going to happen to the console. Nothing has happened right away, and that's because we haven't run the program yet. But once you do run it, it'll print out I'm coding in Java. And that is what we call output. So we've just done our first output in Java, which is a bit exciting. We'll do a lot more cooler things in future lessons, but for now we'll celebrate these small wins. So once we have this output, we can test it out a few more times. Let's add a new line after line 3. We'll try it again. Let's type in something else. So we have system.out.println. Now system has to be capitalized. Capitalization is something very important in coding because the computer sees the lowercase s and the uppercase s as two completely different characters. So if you put in the lowercase s, it might not understand what you're saying. So we'll have that, and then we'll have parentheses and quotation marks. Alright, once we have that down, we can type in whatever we want in here. It'll take in any input at all, and whatever you type in here will show up in our output. For me, I'll just write a small sentence for a greeting. How are you doing today? I hope you're all doing great, by the way. Once you have that down, there's one more thing we have to do before we can get this to run properly. And that is add a semicolon at the end. That is pretty important. I'll get into it more in depth in a bit. So once we do this, we'll run it. And it does print out both of these, which is great because that's exactly what we wanted it to do. Now, I'm going to write a few notes for us, and you can do it on your computer too. And these notes are just for us to remember later on what exactly we've done here. So let's give it a title, output, because that's what we just did. Oh, wow, something happened. We'll give it the title output, and it is underlining right now because it doesn't understand what the heck we just put in. And to fix this, what we have to do before our notes is add 2 forward slashes. And now you can see it's grayed out, which means that it understands we are just writing comments to ourselves. So the computer, when you run the program, it'll start at line 1, it'll read it, then it'll go to the next line, line 2, it'll read it, and it'll go to line 3, then line 4, then line 5, and it'll keep on going until line 8, and then it'll end the program because it's reached the end. Now, what happened before was before the forward slashes, when it reached line 5, it saw like output and didn't know what that meant. So we don't want the computer to get confused, so we have to add 2 forward slashes. And this just tells the computer that we're just writing comments to ourselves. You can ignore everything that's in this line. So the computer will see the 2 forward slashes, and then it'll be like, okay, and then I'll skip to the next line. So it won't affect our program. Alright, so what we've just done, output. This tells the computer to print out a line in the console. Well, in my case, because my sentence was a bit long, it kind of did go to the next line. But notice that everything I've written here is still part of line 6. It's just that my window is a bit small, so. Okay, after you've written this down, if we run the program, nothing bad will happen. So the words we wrote here won't affect our program at all. It'll still run normally like it did before, which is great. Alrighty. Let's also write down what the template for sending output to our computer looks like. It's just system.out.println. print ln, and then parentheses and quotation marks. One more thing, semicolon. Now this semicolon, I've mentioned before, is really important, and it is actually a part of Java. You don't want to miss your semicolon, or else your program won't run. You'll get an error. Now to test this theory, you can try it. We delete the semicolon off line 4 and we try to run the program. We'll get an error because it doesn't understand what we're saying. Now this semicolon serves a specific purpose. It tells the computer when the end of a command is. So it's kind of like a period in English. When the computer reads, it reads from left to right. So it reads system, and then out, and then print ln, then all of the stuff we have here, and then once it reaches the semicolon, it's like, oh, okay, so this is the end of the command, and then it knows to go to the next line. So once again, let's write that down so we don't forget. A semicolon is used to stop the command. In Java, the end of each command must have a semicolon. This tells the computer when to stop. Maybe not when, that might confuse some people. But it tells the computer to stop and go to the next line. Now, not all languages will have semicolons. For example, if you've coded in Python, you might know that Python just requires you to press the spacebar and hop to the next line. You don't need to actually use any semicolons. But there are some languages that will use semicolons, so it is a good habit to be aware of the language you're coding in and whether or not the syntax is any different. Alright, so we've talked about output, and that was just what was in line 3. Now that we've sent output from our code to the console, let's try taking an input. So we'll send information from the console to our code instead. Now I'm gonna leave a few spaces. These spaces are just for us to be able to read our code a bit easier. You can, of course, leave all the spaces out. It won't change anything in the program. But to make it easier on your eyes, I'm gonna give us lots and lots of room to write. Alright, so let's do input next. I'll capitalize this so it's a bit more clear that it's a title. So follow along for now, just copy what I'm writing, and then I'll go back and explain what all of the words are. String name, system.out.print, parentheses, quotation marks, enter your name. Next line, scanner input equals new scanner, parentheses, system in. And then name equals input dot next system dot out dot print line hello plus name plus how are you doing today? Okay, now this might look really confusing, and that's okay. We are beginners, so there are a lot of things that we have yet to learn. I will go back and explain everything. Once you have this all typed up, let's try running the program and seeing what it does. Right, it does give us errors. And we can actually see that in line 14 there are 2 red underlines. And anytime there's a red underline, that's when the computer doesn't know something. So in this case, it says scanner cannot be resolved to a type, which basically means the computer doesn't know what a scanner is. That's okay, because there's one thing we haven't done, and that is import. So let's go back up to line 1, and we'll move all the code down so we have room to type. In line 1, we're going to do something called importing from a library. Let me just write this down. Import from a library. So the thing is, the computer doesn't know what a scanner is. And that's because there are a lot of things in coding where if we had them all pre-downloaded to the computer would just, it would be way too overloaded because there are so many things that we can do with it. So sometimes what you have to do is import a few words from the library. And it's a lot like how if we don't have a book at home, we might go to the library and check it out. Then we'll bring it home, we'll read it, and once we've read it, we will have gained that information from the book. So even though we didn't have the book ourselves, we can still go to the library and get that information. And the same thing happens for the computer. It doesn't know what a scanner is, but it can import from the library of Java, and it can go to the section under utilities, so util, and it can take out a book called Scanner. And once it does that, it'll read about what a scanner is, and so now it knows what a scanner is, and you can notice that on line 17, the red underline is gone, which means that it now knows what a scanner is, and everything's good. You can also notice there is a bit of an orange underline under input, but we don't have to worry too much about that. It won't affect our code. Orange underlines are just suggestions from the computer for proper coding. So we've imported from the library, and now we can try running the code and seeing what it does. Alright, so this is what the computer has printed out in the console. The first 2 lines are from what we wrote in lines 6 and 7, so that's not relevant to our new program on input. So let me just quickly comment that out so it doesn't affect, so it's a bit more clear as to what we're doing. Let me just stop this program and run it again. Now with the commented out code, we should just have what we have written here. And it prints enter your name, which is exactly what we asked it to do in line 16. So right now, the computer has stopped running. It's waiting for us to give it input. And so it's kind of just sitting there, and it can't go on to the next line yet because of what's written at line 18. I'm asking it to take the next input, which means it's waiting for me to type in something here. I can type in anything. So enter our name, my name, and then once I do that and press the enter key, it'll type out, "Hello Kathy, how are you doing today?" Which is what I asked it to do in line 19. So the program is running as expected, which is great, but at this point you might not understand what we just did. That's okay, because it is a lot of new stuff, so it might be a bit confusing. Let's go back and talk about it. So at line 15, what we've done is we've started a new variable called name. You don't have to know exactly what a variable is yet. We will be covering variables in our next lesson. So we have our name, and then we ask it to print an output. Remember outputs? We just did it a bit earlier up here in line 6 and 7. Uncomment that so you guys remember. Something really helpful about an IDE is it usually has a color code to it. So certain words are color coded to make it clear. Now, in line 16, we asked it to output enter your name, and that's exactly what it did here. And in line 17, we created a new scanner, and we named it input. Now, a scanner is basically just like a robot that knows how to read things. So let's write that in. A scanner is a robot that knows how to read things. And what is it reading? Well, we're telling it to read system in. And in this case, system in is our keyboard. And so when the program had stopped earlier and it was waiting for us, it was actually waiting for us to give it input from our keyboard. So when we type in the keyboard, that's the information it receives. Okay, next at line 20, this is when we tell it to wait for the next input. So it's waiting for us to type. And then at line 21, it'll print out hello, and then name, so whatever we stored into the system in, and then how are you doing today? We can even, to simplify it a bit, we can take out this extra sentence, so maybe it'll just print out hello, name. Let's try running it again. And waits for us to enter our name. So right now it's at line 20, it's at the waiting part. So let's enter our name. It can be anything. I'm going to use my neighbor's name. Her name is Dora. And when you press enter, it should type out hello, Dora. Wonderful. So we've taken input and then we've used output to print it out to the console. That's a lot of information, but this is pretty much the foundation of a lot of what we're going to do in the next few lessons. So now that we've done a bit of outputting and inputting, let's try a challenge. So on your own, you can try out a program. Now, I want you to create a program that So I want you to create a program that takes in age as input, and then it will output a sentence that says, you are blank blank years old. And with that blank blank, I want you to have whatever age the user inputted in the program typed out there. So I'll give you a minute to try. You can pause the video, and when you're ready to see the solution, you can unpause it. Alright, hello, welcome back. To start it off, it will look a lot like what we just created up here. So we'll have a string age, and then we'll have a sentence that says, please enter your name. This is technically not necessary, but it does make it a lot more user-friendly. Sorry, did I say name? I meant age. Whoops. Don't forget your semicolons. Then age is equal to input.next. You don't actually need to create another scanner here because we've already created one up in line 17, so you don't need to. We can just reuse that. Then we'll output our sentence, system.out.println. You are, now here's where we add in our age. So what we have to do is we just have to use the plus sign, which means add, then our age, then another plus sign, years old. So our sentence was, you are, let's say, for example, 12, use 12 years old. And what happens is, because 12 is a number that can change, that's what we want our age to be, right? So we have to just replace 12 with the word age, which is the variable we created up here. And so that's what we have in our output. So if you are, then we kind of stick an age in between R and years. And so when we run the program, we should have something that looks like this. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to comment out everything we wrote before, just so it's not really confusing. I'm going to show you another method of commenting. So if you put a / and a star, you can actually comment out large sections at once. So, you now see that everything between lines 7 to 22 is grayed out, and that just means it's commented out and it won't affect the program. So the computer is going to skip all that. What I just did was / and then a star, this at the beginning, and then star, and then / at the end. And so everything between these two stars will be commented out. I'll write that down for you guys. Alright, so now that we have this commented out, the computer should only read everything that's at 31 and 30, everything that's between 31 and 34. Let's try running the program. Alright, it does give you an error because of what we did up here. We commented out this important line at 18, which creates the scanner, so we're going to have to drag this line out of the comments so that the computer can actually read it. Let's try running it. And we can put in a number. Then we'll press the enter key and it'll type out whatever we wanted it to do at line 34. Now the problem is, because this is a computer, it doesn't automatically filter out what you can put in. So even though we know that ages usually have to be in numbers, well, they do have to be in numbers unless they're written, of course, but anyone can type in any gibberish and the computer will still take that in and use it normally. So this is an example of kind of an error that the user can give it. We'll do a bit of error trapping in future lessons where we can try to fix this. But for now, we do have this problem, and it is a bit unfortunate. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. Today, we learned about input, we learned about output, and we created a mini program that takes in your age, and then it outputs it. Now, I'll give you a little preview of what's to come. In our next lesson, we'll be talking a bit about variables, but in future lessons, we can start doing cooler things with our programs. What I mean by that is, I'm going to type in a few things, and it may not make sense yet, but that's okay. We'll cover it in future lessons. So we change that to an int. Now, the program that I've just typed up here should do this. It'll give us an error is what it does. Let's check out what that error is. Oh, wow, I might have accidentally started a new import up here. So it asks us for our age. Let's say we are 30. And then once we press enter, it'll type out you can vote. And so in Canada, the age of the age of adulthood is also when you can start voting. So if you're above 18, if you're 18 or above, you can vote. But let's say let's put in 10. If we're 10 years old, theoretically we should not be able to vote. And let's see what the program says. You may not vote yet. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek into where we're going. But for now, we're going to work with input and output. One more thing that I'd like to mention before we end off this lesson is the difference between println and print. So let me copy lines 7 and 8 and paste it down here. I'm also going to comment out the stuff that we wrote here so we don't get confused later. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to comment these out. So right now, the only things that the computer can read is line 42 and 43. So what exactly, you might have seen that at line 17, I used print instead of println. What that does is basically this. You know, it might be better to demonstrate with some input so that you can see where the keyboard is located at. So I'm going to try just that. Allow me a moment to edit the code for demonstration. Okay. I've just made a few edits to the code that we've written to show you what exactly the difference between println and print is. So if we run this program, okay, right now the computer is at line 44. And because at line 43 we've used a println, what it told the computer to do is basically print out our message, so enter your age, and that's what it does. And then it tells it to print an ln. An ln stands for line. So after it prints out our message, it prints out an extra line. So now you can see the cursor is below enter your age. So let's give it a try. Let's enter a number 20. We'll press enter. Now the computer is at line 45 and 46. It's waiting for input. Now at line 45, instead of println, we just told it to print. And so what the computer does is it just prints the message. It doesn't print an extra line like it did before, and that's why over here you can see the cursor is to the right of our message instead of below it. So when we type, it'll show up right beside the message on the same line. And that's it. That's the difference between print and println. It's a useful difference because it can help you format your code a bit better. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at auxiproject@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment. We'd be happy to answer all your questions. So thanks so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you here again for our next lesson. Bye!